Hello, it's Rafi. Hello, it's Rafael Gutierrez. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to, and I'm still getting the glare. Let's see if this works. Today I'm going to talk about the pretty much radius and ulna, mainly for martial artists. For those of you who haven't taken anatomy, pretty much if you do your Dr. Evil little finger here, the ulna follows it all the way down to the tip of the elbow. The radius is the one on the other side. And there are little things that are important for both. Now, big thing to actually remember, which I mentioned last time, is bones tend to break either when the angles are off or if there is no protection. So for instance, when people are doing bottom fist, you'll actually notice that there's a big hunk of meat right next to the bone. For me, I actually measured it, it's about just over half an inch. So it is a reason why the bottom fist can be used and not necessarily be damaged as much as other areas. Now, when we're dealing with the bones of the forearm, there are actually different places that it can fracture, and I drew them here, but I will talk about what you've seen in a little bit. If you take the evil ulna, coming down here, the main fracture that you see in the ulna is actually called the nightsticks fracture, or Megatelli's fracture, and that is someone comes up here as a stick hits right in the middle. That's actually going to be playing later, but the reason you actually get that is if you feel your ulna, you'll notice that there is no protection in it. If you're taking anatomy, by the way, you can actually use that to determine what you're looking at. Ulna follows the pinky. You actually do have some structures on there, which I'll mention a little bit later on. The radius usually breaks falling on your outstretched hand. Just like the scaphoid, which is found here, radius breaks the same way. And it will usually break up on the wrist area here. Now, the ulna can also be broken when you actually fall on an outstretched hand. You can break both of them. Or if you fall on your hand kind of like this, so the force goes this way, it can affect the ulna as well. Now, there are other fractures that can happen. And one of the things you'll notice is when someone actually twists your arm, twists your wrist, a lot of times you'll feel more of the pain in the ulna area than the radius. Sometimes it will be about the same. Part of the reason is the radius is actually pretty stable. If you look at this picture here that I drew, this right here would be the radius. You will see that it's bigger on the area where the wrist is, which is called the distal end. Distal means farther away. So it's the area farther away from the midline. And over here on the proximal end, you actually have a round structure. It's kind of like pretty much like a wheel. Part of you can actually refer to the radius by the wheel of the radius. It follows the thumb, and this allows you to rotate your hand like this. Now, if I hold my my biceps here so it doesn't move too much, you'll notice I could go from, this is called supination, to roughly pronation. After this, I actually am using my humerus to get it to move. So it's not a complete movement from one side to the other, but it is a radius that it crosses over the ulna. The ulna, if you notice, it's a thin bone here and gets bigger. Now, last time I mentioned how you have certain areas of the hand and wrist, which are called the support column of the hand. The support column of the arm actually would go through here, the radius, and then to the ulna here. This doesn't have the same support. It won't break from an impact like that because of the angle, and also you do have a little area of cushioning at the where the radius is. But I guess if a blow is hard enough, you may actually cause this dislocation of this area here. This, by the way, is held together by a ligament, which I'll talk a little bit about later. So you have the radius, which has a round head, and it rotates around the ulna. Now over on this side, you have a couple structures. You can see it here that I drew. What you have is kind of like a hand-shaped bony projection called the olecranon process. And that olecranon process has actually a fossa called the olecranon fossa. And that area goes into the bone here called the humerus and pretty much latches on to the back of it. You also do have a hook called the coracoid process, and you do have these two pen-like projections, which are called the styloids. The styloids can be broken, by the way, and happens more often than most people realize. But when you're looking at these, you can see why people tell you to turn, especially if you're hitting hard and you want to make sure the force follows the best path possible. You want to cross, so you actually do switch the force from one bone to two. Now, actually, the way I punch is more of a whipping motion, so it doesn't really matter which one I use, because as soon as it hits, as soon as my arm hits, I'm actually back up here. Let me see what's behind it. So as soon as it hits, it does, the force doesn't go back, it just knocks, and that's it. It just knocks the hand back. And so these are actually the two bones to worry about. Now, why did I tell you about the radius breaking a certain way in the ulna? Well, if you notice, the radius doesn't break through direct trauma. A lot of times it can, assuming the trauma is enough. Part of the reason is if you feel where the radius goes, you don't just have a bigger bone here on this area, but you also have musculature, and muscular does protect the structure. Also, if you come here, you'll notice that you do have musculature on both sides, and it does protect the bone. And the ulna here doesn't. Now, what that means is this: you actually have to, when you're looking at how you use these bones, you really have to pay attention to how people strike. If you actually think about it, if you take me, I don't strike straight here. I'm going to go towards the midline, so here. Same thing with this side. So you're going to have two things. You're going to have angles coming in where someone strikes, unless you're doing these art and then the same thing. Interesting thing is this: it's really hard to go from an inside here to straight here. Your straight will be angled because of the way your arms are and where midline are. Yes, you can punch to the side, straight out to the side. Usually, though, if you're aiming for midline and someone's in there, you're going to come in there. It also does allow you to use other muscles, which I won't talk about too much right now until we get there. So let's take a block. If someone's punching towards us, usually they're going for the midline here. So what we want to block is we want to block in the midline. Now, a lot of times people will say, okay, so you're going to block and then turn. That's fine. If you look at it, you're using the bigger, meatier bone where the midline is and turning at the end here. If it's a wild hook, that actually may actually be good enough because you have a deflection. Now, what if someone's coming with a stick straight down and you come straight up here, taking the blow directly here? Again, we have the fracture called the nightstick fracture. Not a good idea to take a blow from the hit here. Part of the reason I mention that is I've seen people talk about defense against clubs, defense against a bow, and they're using the ulna to try to block. You block with the ulna, especially a stick, there's a reason why this is called a nightstick fracture. I wouldn't recommend here. I would actually recommend going in and trying not to get hit, trying to actually avoid trying to go use angles. But that's actually not what I'm going to talk about right now. So we actually do have a bone that we really don't want to hit with, except at this end over here. Now, the olecranon process is pretty strong, so when you're actually doing elbows, you do want to use this. You don't want to use this area here. You hit someone's head like this. Here, you're going to cause, again, a fracture. Here, probably not. Now, I will tell you, there are people who break the olecranon process as well, so you got to be careful. And there's actually some people who say instead of coming in with the elbow here, you can actually come in with the hammer fist here. Some of you who have read Cross' book know that that's one of the things that is really important to actually read into when you're dealing with certain katas. So we have the radius and ulna. We actually do notice that the ulna has a little cavity here. So you don't want to necessarily punch with these fingers lined up because you can end up twisting your wrists in that area. This area of the ulna actually allows for mobility of the arm, just like the area over here, the proximal area of the radius, allows you to rotate here. So together, we actually can see how the arm works and why we want to do things a certain way. Why do we want to cross here rather than keep it straight? It's just for strength. Now, is this always the case? There's going to be some people who can actually find a reason why it would be a good idea to do it different. But if you're actually going for general rules, you want to use the general rules you can see. Space here, the fractures of the carpals, metacarpals here, being a big reason to punch a certain way. The wrists, the bones that break, tells you why you shouldn't try to stop a blow here Or I've actually seen people say, oh, you want to stop a blow here. Again, reasons you don't want to do that. I actually tell people deflect the bows, deflect the hit, but try to make sure that it actually doesn't hurt you. Over here, you can see how the elbow goes into the humerus, which we'll talk about more. We'll talk more about the humerus as time goes on. Now that I have the radius and ulna, it actually is a good idea to put everything in a place. So I'm going to actually work my way backwards. So olecranon process is here. This is the ulna. You actually get to the end, which you have a bump here, which is called the head of the ulna. And then you have a little pointy projection, a styloid-like projection called the styloid process. Go figure, it says it. Now, I actually tell you this because I did have an argument with someone who taught anatomy at a local university here, who was telling their students that the head of the ulna was the styloid process. In essence, they didn't understand anatomy, which happens a lot. If you want to take anatomy, I would tell you to Google your instructor. Make sure that they actually have experience in anatomy, because if not, you will not get a good class. For instance, if the person who's teaching anatomy is a botanist, they don't have human anatomy experience. Someone who's an avian reproductive instructor will not have the experience to know true human anatomy. They'll give you lists and you can memorize those, but sure, if you're doing that, you may as well just use this and email me or on the comments, ask what list that I would give you, and I give you that. Now, once you know what a styloid process is, you can go to the radius. And again, I always tell people, when I was a kid, you'd say things are rad, and that's a radius. In the radius, you have the head, which is this round. You do have the tuberosity, which is a big lump of bone over here, which I didn't draw in. And then you get to the end, and you have the stylus over here. Then you have the carpal bones, which I talked about pretty much ad nauseum last time. And then you have the metacarpals. So carpals, metacarpals, and the phalanges. And what you'll notice is whatever you learn about one bone, you can bring it over here. So anytime you see a pen-like projection, like here in the radius or in the ulna, it's going to be a styloid. Coronoid process over here, coracoid process, I'm sorry, is a hook-like projection, and you're going to see it in a couple other bones later. Next time I'm going to talk about the humerus and why that's important. One of the big things that I will actually mention is while you're looking at these, if you do know anyone who does grappling or any type of, pretty much any type of wrist locks, you'll notice that these are areas that people tell you be careful, because if you do it wrong, you can break certain aspects. I hope you enjoy the video, and we'll have a nice day. If you want to support the channel, please go on Amazon. Just look for R.H. Gutierrez, MD, and you can find a couple of my books. If there are any questions, please ask them, and I will obviously get to it. Today I actually drew it earlier, and I think I might do that just so people can see what I'm talking about. Hope you enjoy this, and have a nice day.